Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. I'm super grateful that you're here. Don't ever forget this Biden clip right here.
It took 2 days to take control of the airport. We have control of the airport now.
Still a lot of pandemonium outside the airport.
Well, there is, but look, but no one's being killed right now. God forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but no one's being killed right now. We got 1,000, somewhere 1,200 out yesterday, a couple thousand a day, and it's increasing. We're going to get those people out.
But we've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
Do you guys have the video of people getting shot outside the airport? On his first point, no one's getting killed. No one's getting killed. Yes, they are. And on the second point, it was 5 days ago. Gosh, that sure smells a lot like Hillary's, at this point, what difference does it make? During her congressional testimony about Benghazi. Could you imagine if Donald Trump was asked on January 8th about the January 6th Capitol Hill riots, if he dismissed it as, oh, George, that was 5 days ago. First of all, it was 2 days ago. But either way, still, the dismissiveness. I thought we were supposed to elect Joe Biden because he was the caring, compassionate man as opposed to the evil monster that was Donald Trump. Okay, we got more Biden coming up. We got to do this. We got to take the time to do this. It's super important. You ready for our run through of the Afghanistan papers of 2019? All of it is on the website, mikeslater.locals.com. This is super important. We must understand the depth of how much our leaders failed us. We must truly understand. It is worse than you can fathom. Now, let me say this up front. You, veterans, you did not fail. You were given a task, you accomplished it admirably, honorably. Our leaders failed you, and our leaders failed all of us. First of all, we should have known, right? Just Afghanistan's a bad idea. Alexander the Great, it took him 4 years to conquer from the Mediterranean to Iran, and then he invaded what's today Afghanistan. He lost as many men in 1 day of battle as he did in the previous 4 years. This was 330 BC, thousands of years ago. Plutarch said that the tribesmen in Afghanistan are like a hydra. Cut off one head of the snake and 3 more grow back. Things haven't changed. There's nothing new under the sun. The Brits left Afghanistan in 1842. The Prime Minister of England in 1963, he gave one piece of advice to the incoming Prime Minister. He said, my dear boy, as long as you do not invade Afghanistan, you will be absolutely fine. The Soviets gave up after 10 years in 1989, and just 12 years after that, just 12 years later, we decided to give it a shot. Tried for 20 years, and it all fell in 3 days. How did it fall so miserably? 2016, the Office of the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction released an internal report called Lessons Learned. Those 2016 took 3 years for the Washington Post to get the documents. The most important thing to understand here as we're going through this, these are off-the-record interviews. The people who were giving their assessments here were being 100% honest because this was all off-the-record stuff. These were not their public pronouncements or public PR statements. These are off-the-record, honest assessments from the very top people in Afghanistan. They did over 400 interviews. These are not the public lies. These are the honest beliefs. We'll start with Douglas Lute, 3-star general, Afghan czar during Bush and Obama in 2015. He said, we are devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. We didn't know what we were doing. What are the demographics of the country? The economic drivers. You want to talk about aid? Really? We're going to do something in Afghanistan with $10 billion? Haiti's a small country in our own backyard with no extremist insurgency. We can't develop it. What are we trying to do here? We don't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking. It's really much worse than you think. He goes on and said we had no goals. He said one of the goals he was given was to establish a flourishing market economy. Like, what does that mean? The opium drug trade was the only part of their economy that even worked. We're like a flourishing market economy. By the way, we spent $9 billion to try to stop the poppy opium trade. And 18 years later, they were growing more opium than before we even started the program to try to get them to stop. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So the general goes on, he talks about how we would just pour money, just obscene amounts of money. They couldn't spend it as fast as they need. There was just constant money nonstop. And it was for projects that the Afghans couldn't, first of all, didn't need, couldn't even use, couldn't sustain. He tells the story of a ribbon cutting ceremony that they had, in his words, some godforsaken providence for a police headquarters. Right? He said it was this huge Army Corps of Engineer building. It had a glass facade, big atrium, this big giant building, right, that you paid for. He says the police chief couldn't even open the door. Why? He had never seen a doorknob like this. To me, this encapsulates the whole experience in Afghanistan, doesn't it? Isn't that the perfect visual? So, we're going to come save you. We're going to rescue you. We're going to fix you. We're going to nation build you. It's going to be amazing. Here's this beautiful new building. They don't even know how to open the door. One contractor told a congressman, there's a congressman visiting, and the contractor said, listen, I'm supposed to spend $3 million a day here. You have told me to spend $3 million a day. It's impossible. Everyone here is living in mud huts. There's no windows. It's a dump here. What, like this part that in Afghanistan he was in, he said, I can't even spend $3 million a day. And that's what you've obligated me to do. Right? They just had too much money. You spent $335 million on a power plant outside Kabul. We built it, handed it over to the Afghans. It was operating at 2% of capacity. They couldn't afford to keep it going, / didn't even know how to keep it going. And now it's nothing. It's gone. It's waste. It's useless. $335 million. A retired Navy SEAL in these reports, he said, what do we get for, at the time it was $1 trillion. Now it's $2 trillion, closer to $2 trillion. He said, what do we get for $1 trillion? Okay, we killed bin Laden, great. And this SEAL says, I said that Osama was probably laughing in his watery grave, considering how much we spent in Afghanistan. Washington Post, check this out. Several of those interviewed described explicit and sustained efforts by the U.S. government to deliberately mislead the public. They said it was common at military headquarters in Kabul and at the White House to distort statistics to make it appear that the United States was winning the war when that was not the case. Now, as we talk about this, think also of COVID. It's the same people operating in the same systems with the same lack of accountability. COVID and Afghanistan, they're the same story when it comes to lying and manipulating, and no one's ever held accountable, and there's no end in sight. It's the same deal. The head of the federal agency who conducted these interviews, the lessons learned exit interviews, which again, the people at the time doing them, this was not for the public, this was off the record. The guy who did all this admitted that all the documents and all the interviews prove, in his words, the American people have constantly been lied to. Constantly been lied to. This is a former advisor to the Army Special Forces. The problem is we didn't know who the good guys were or the bad guys were. Was Al-Qaeda the enemy or was the Taliban? Was Pakistan good or bad? What about the Islamic State? What about the warlords that were on the CIA's payroll? He said advisors would come in and ask him, what's going on? And they would expect to, they would say, where are the good guys? Where are the bad guys? And the guy's like, no one knows. And the guy couldn't fathom. He's like, what do you mean no one knows? He's like, yeah, no, we don't know who the bad guys are. Donald Rumsfeld, this is 2003, Donald Rumsfeld wrote in a memo, I have no visibility into who the bad guys are. We are woefully deficient in human intelligence. How about this story? Back to the opium. 82% of the world's opium comes from Afghanistan. That's turned into heroin, right? So 82% of the world's opium is from Afghanistan. We spent $9 billion to try and stop the growth of opium. And then now they grow more than they did when we started, right? That's classic government, isn't it? Right? So how did we try to stop opium production in Afghanistan? So the first thing the British did is they would pay the poppy farmers to destroy their crops. So the British come in and they say, hey, you got 100 acres of opium. Here's $100,000 to destroy your crops. And the farmers are like, great, 100 grand. I was going to get 50 grand from the drug lords. You're giving me 100, great, super. So now imagine you're a poppy farmer. What do you do the next year? You just got 100 grand for destroying your poppy farm, your poppy crop. So what are you going to do next season? You're going to grow more. And you're not just going to grow what you have. You're going to take that money from the taxpayer, the American taxpayer, and you're going to go buy as much land as you can so you can grow even more poppy. So that's what they did for a couple of years. And then the U.S. government came in and said, no, we're not going to do this anymore. So then we just destroyed all their crops without any compensation, which ticked the farmers off so much they sided with the Taliban. One official said it was sad to see so many people behave so stupidly. But that's what happens in bureaucracies. Everyone loses their ever-loving minds. And it's the same thing with COVID. Everyone is behaving so stupidly and deceitfully, intentionally. So Obama came to office, and one of these generals says there was so much pressure. This is a National Security Council official. Said there was so much pressure from the Obama White House to show that the troop surge, this was 2009, 2011, to show that it was working. So it's like, okay, we're doing this surge. Tell us it's working. Show us it's working. There's so much pressure. Here's what this National Security Advisor guy said. He said it was impossible to create good metrics. This is how bad things were. It was impossible to create good metrics. We tried using troop numbers trained, violence levels, control of territory. None of it painted an accurate picture. The metrics were always manipulated for the duration of the war. Always manipulated for the duration of the war. Same with COVID, by the way. And no matter what happened, they would try to spin it into a good thing. Suicide bombings in Kabul were portrayed as a sign of the Taliban's desperation, that insurgents were too weak to engage in direct combat. Meanwhile, a rise in U.S. troop deaths was cited as proof that American forces are taking the fight to the enemy. Do you see how they would spin everything? They would spin everything to make it a good thing, manipulating the White House and you the entire time. John Carafano, Naval War College strategist, he advised Marines in 2011. He said that these military officials in Afghanistan, they would spend tons of time churning out these color-coded charts that would try to spin their positive results. Here's what the guy said. They had a really expensive machine, and they would try to print the really large pieces of paper like in a print shop. And there would be a caveat that these are not actually scientific figures or there's not a scientific process behind it. So they would just try to woo the White House or the Pentagon or whoever else, and how things are so hunky-dory here. Things are great. Look, here's a big giant chart we made, and it's blue. There's some blue and there's some green. See, it's awesome. And this guy said that nobody dared to question whether the numbers were accurate, let alone meaningful. Didn't matter. Because no one is held accountable. Just like this. No one's been fired. Has anyone been fired for what's going on here? Of course not. No one ever will. And just to go back to the beginning, it's such a shame because it didn't have to be this way. George Bush gave a speech at VMI, the Virginia Military Institute, in 2002. And he said the history of military conflict in Afghanistan has been one of initial success, followed by long years of floundering and ultimate failure. Again, that was 2002. He said, we're not going to repeat that mistake. That's exactly what we did. That's exactly what we did. And what a disaster all of it was. Again, this is not anything to say for the men on the ground who did their jobs. It's the leaders who failed their jobs, failed all of us, 20 years. So of course, it was all going to be capped off with Biden's failure of a withdrawal. We couldn't even get out the right way. Our men and women there performed with honor. Our leaders disgraced us all. We'll talk more about the generals who gave such an embarrassing press conference yesterday. I would say should be fired. Like, not even fired. Like, should resign. Like, I don't even get, like, how can you have such little shame that you would continue to go to work after what they've done and what they did yesterday? And then Biden, of course. I mean, give me a break. So we're going to break that down more coming up. Not in the next segment, but the segment following with a wonderful guest that we have coming up next. Because it's the same. As I said, Afghanistan and COVID are the same. It's the same people, the same systems. It's the same failure. It's the same manipulation. It's the same lies. It's the same spinning of numbers. It's the same spinning of a narrative. It's the same brightly colored charts with manipulated numbers. It's the same thing. Coming up next, I have a little update on masks and booster shots. Are you kidding me? We'll do that coming up next. Hey, friendly reminder to go to our website, thefirsttv.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's called Up First Newsletter. It's great. Get it early in the morning and has all the stories that are most important and told and framed for you properly as we embark upon the day. Got to find people you trust. And I'm grateful you're here and you trust us. Thefirsttv.com. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I'm excited for our next segment. We're going to talk to Breitbart's Pentagon correspondent, and the Pentagon is having a briefing right now, so that correspondent will be able to break it all down for us coming up next, so you don't miss anything important there. I want to talk about COVID here, but it's not that much of a pivot. It's not one story over here and one story over here. They're the same. I cannot stress this enough. Same people, same systems, same lack of accountability, same lying, same manipulation. It's the same story, just slightly different characters, right? The Pentagon's over here, CDC over here, but it's the same thing. Right, have you been hearing about booster shots? I thought they were kidding. I thought that was a joke. Booster shots? For how long? Forever. Forever. 2 shots every year for the rest of your life for a disease with a 99.99% survival rate. Holy cow. But don't worry. Don't complain. Everything's great. This is the senior economist writer at the Sydney Morning Herald. As you know, Australia they're on lockdown. They're crazy over there right now. You are not allowed to, in any circumstance, you're not allowed to leave beyond 5 kilometers radius from your house, 3 miles. So you can't go beyond a 3-mile radius from your house for any reason, even to work. Okay? So this woman in the Sydney Morning Herald, she wrote this article, Cheer Up. Why you might just learn to love your 5-kilometer radius. It's great. Lockdown's wonderful. And I'm not kidding. This is one of the, I think this is the most dystopian, it definitely is. It's definitely the most dystopian thing I've ever read because it's like in the front of the concentration camps, it says work will set you free, right? It's like that Orwellian mind-twistingly dark. In the article, she says that you now, because of the lockdowns in Australia, you now have the freedom from choice. You have the freedom from choice. That is now freedom. You having fewer choices available to you because the government won't let you. You having fewer choices available to you is a good thing. You should thank the government. You need to thank the government for liberating you from having so many paralyzing choices to make in your life, like where to exercise, where to eat, what stores you should go to, where you can travel, where you can work. Oh, I just can't figure it all out. What do I do? Oh, I need the government to limit these choices for me. Oh, thank you, government, for saving me from having to make choices. Thank you for taking away my freedom. I'm not kidding. That's what she said. You now have the freedom from choice. Oh my gosh. Are you with me on that? On how insane that is? Freedom is freedom of choice. And they spun it to you now have freedom from choice. Whoa. Holy cow. All right, so that was yesterday. And that was in Australia, in New York, in America, New York Times. How about this one? Actually, wearing a mask can help your child learn. So the argument is that, yes, sure, your kids won't be able to see their teachers' faces anymore, right? Which obviously kids need to be able to see for their emotional intelligence and learning and literally like learning vowel sounds if they're young enough and all the rest. Sure, they won't be able to see that anymore, but that will just strengthen their abilities to focus on other communication aspects like body language and a person's eyes. So it's actually good that we're handicapping them in this way. It'll make them stronger in the end. Yes, that's right, psychopath lady. That's also why all my kids, I tie their right hands behind their back all day. I just put them in like a straitjacket, but it's only with one arm. I got a one-arm straitjacket. Well, it's a normal straitjacket, but I just cut the one arm off. You can't buy one-arm straitjackets. I bought a normal straitjacket. I just put their right arm in it. And I'm hoping, they're right-handed, of course, and I'm hoping that Jack, my 4.5-year-old, can grow to be a major league pitcher. And there's a much better chance that he'll be a pitcher if he's a lefty, but he's right-handed. So if I just tie his right hand behind his back all day, it'll strengthen his left hand. That's all. It's good. I'm strengthening the rest. And that's not all day, right? It's only 12 hours a day. It's no big deal. It's good for him. She says wearing a mask can help teach children to pay more attention to their own bodies and physical behaviors. Keeping a mask on over the course of a school day involves the kind of self-control and self-regulation that many children find challenging. Younger children must inhibit the urge to pull off their mask, and older children must be mindful of when their mask is slipping down or when it's okay to take it off. Yes, that's right. Forcing our kids to be unnecessarily miserable, that's a good thing. Forcing our kids to be miserable while they sit there in pain, in physical and emotional pain, making them stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Right, 4-year-old? Right, 2-year-old? I recommend this lady wear a plastic bag over her head all day. Oh, no, not to hurt her. No, I'm sorry. No, let me be clear. I want her to wear a plastic bag over her head all day so that she can be more aware of her body. That's all. And just imagine the self-control that she'll learn. Oh goodness, her ability to hold her breath for longer periods of time, it'll actually probably improve her cardiovascular health. It'll make her a better person. The research on self-control and self-regulation suggests that children who master the skills needed to keep their mask on will grow up to be better at achieving their long-term goals, problem-solving, and handling stressful situations. That's right. Your obedient little mask wearer will live a more successful life. Make them miserable, but they'll be better off for it. And for children who habitually bite their nails or pick their nose, a mask could be precisely the thing they need to kick the habit. That's great. That's great. Same thing with the plastic bag over your head, lady. Isn't that amazing? And that's how it works. That's how it works with these progressives, with the media, and with politicians. At first they say, oh, that's not happening. That thing you're worried about, that's not happening. And then they say, okay, fine, it's happening. But it's not that bad. And then they say, oh, okay, fine, it's happening, but it's optional. And then they'll say, oh, it's happening, and it's actually a great thing. And then it's, oh, if you're opposed to this, you're a bad person. Same with critical race theory. Same deal. And I'll tell you what's next. I'll tell you what's next because it's already here. There's reports that the University of Washington's Med Center, 64-year-old man was taken off the heart transplant waiting list. He was on it for 2.5 years. They took him off of it because he did not have the COVID vaccine. He told his doctor he would not get the vaccine. A couple days later, June 7th, he got a letter. Your name has been removed from the wait list at the University of Washington Medical Center. This was done in follow-up to your recent conversation with providers regarding the Heart Transplant Selection Committee's concerns about compliance with COVID-19 related policies and recommendations. We can reassess you for reinstatement on the list should the compliance concerns resolve in the future. How about that? See how fast it goes from healthcare is a right to, oh, you don't get healthcare. Right, the left is all Medicare for all. Well, not everyone, except the unvaccinated. Quinnipiac University in Connecticut, they say that if you're not vaccinated, most schools, you're not even allowed to go on campus if you're not vaccinated. Right? But I think this is a more relevant sign of what's to come for all of us is you can go to QPAC unvaccinated, but you're not allowed to use the internet. Australia is building a new quarantine center outside of their city where they will drag you to it if you test positive for COVID. But it's good. It's good, this quarantine hub. It's a good thing. Because when you're there, when you're at this quarantine hub, you can really concentrate on your health. You can be there, you can be present. You don't have to worry about other things. You're not distracted. I mean, you got a lot of freedom from choice, right? So you're there and you can concentrate on your health. And it's going to be a beautiful place. You know what? We live such a hectic life, you know. Going to this hub, it'll be beautiful, right? It'll be like when you were a kid at summer camp. Remember camp? Remember your time at camp? So this is a camp you can go to where you can concentrate on your health. Paying attention yet? I don't know when people are going to notice. I don't know when people are going to wake up. There's such a lack of, I would say imagination, but it's not imagination. It's happening. Stop complying now. They'll never stop. You think I'll just do this one last thing. I'll do this one last thing. And I'll just do this one last thing. No. They'll never stop. Coming up next, talk about Afghanistan. Breitbart's Pentagon correspondent with Milley and the defense secretary yesterday. Holy cow. We'll give you the latest, what just happened literally just now with their latest briefing. What a shame. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusader. So we spent the first segment of the show talking big picture. We went back to the 2019 Pentagon Papers and just got some deep insight into how much of a failure this whole thing's been for pretty much the entirety of the 20 years. And then, of course, capped with an epic fail of a withdrawal that we're still in the midst of right now, by the way. Let's stop talking about this in the past tense. This is still a major problem right now, and the president refuses to talk about it in any serious way. The Pentagon just got done with a briefing about this. Kristina Wong is the Pentagon correspondent for wonderful Breitbart. Kristina, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
I'm grateful you're here. Thanks for covering this. So what's the latest? What just happened at the Pentagon briefing?
Yes, so there was just a Pentagon briefing, and we heard that about 2,000 people have been flown out within the last 24 hours, and that tracks with what we 300 are Americans, and that also tracks with what we've been hearing. So the military is focused on securing the airport. They're focused on getting passengers out, and that's a mixture of American citizens, Afghans who helped U.S. military operations and other NATO allies, and just getting as many people out as possible. And they hope to get out about 5,000 to 9,000 per day. They're not there yet. We don't know how far away they are from that. It's just hasn't happened yet. So we're talking about a trickle of Americans and others getting out of Afghanistan. There is a self-imposed deadline by Biden by August 31st. I think we all saw that. Biden said in his recent interview with ABC News that the U.S. military will not leave until every American is out. However, what we're also hearing from the Pentagon is that the U.S. military won't be utilized to go rescue any of the 11,000 estimated Americans around the country. And I think you're hearing a lot of frustration from people, a lot of questions at the Pentagon. What is the U.S. military doing to get these Americans out? And so far, they can't do anything. They're just focused on securing the airport, because that's the most important thing, because the Taliban have surrounded the airport with checkpoints, and the Taliban control Afghanistan. The Taliban control security in Afghanistan. So the U.S. military is not doing anything to go get Americans stranded.
Yes, it's one thing to control the airport, but if no one can get inside of the airport, and we've seen more and more videos of the violence and the gunshots outside, and people have perhaps seen the video of people carrying their kids or throwing their kids across a crowd of people to hopefully toss them over the fence to get them in, because that's the best option that they have, is to just throw your kid into a mob and hopefully they make it on some airplane somehow. Like, holy cow. So like what is an American in Afghanistan to do if the Taliban controls every single road to the airport? How can they ever do this? And then, so that's my first thing. And the second thing is, I've been reading today that the British are going out and actually getting people. And they're bragging in the Telegraph that they've gotten 1,000 people a day so far. They're going out and rescuing people. And Americans are not. Have you heard, or has the Pentagon talked anything about that?
The Pentagon did get that today. Why can't we do the same? Why can't we do the same as the Brits, who are going out and rescuing Americans? And it really comes down to a political decision. And Biden would be the one who would order the military, authorize the military to do this. The U.S. military can do it. It's just not authorized to do it. And we heard yesterday from the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. He said, we don't have the capability to do it. I'm not sure if he meant, the U.S. military can't do it, but, I think he's trying to cover for the White House. But the military has not been given the mission to go rescue any Americans, or even expand past a perimeter. And that does raise some questions. Is it even possible? So, right now it does seem like the U.S. at least is at the goodwill of the Taliban to let Americans through. And to your first question, it's an open question. If you're an American in Afghanistan, you're receiving conflicting messages. First, you were told, shelter in place, don't come to the airport. And then if you go to the airport, your security is not guaranteed. Now it's go to the airport. We've worked out a deal with the Taliban to let you through. And that doesn't really account for reality on the ground, where the Taliban are, firing into crowds. There was a reported, I think, at least 12 dead so far, Afghans. It's chaotic. I've heard from my sources, both Americans, Afghans, international citizens, that they're afraid to go to the airport. They don't know what to do. The Taliban are going door to door in some cases. If you're an American in Afghanistan, do you risk going to the airport? It's a chaotic scene. It's surrounded. Are you going to be stuck outside, get to a gate? There's just no clear answers for Americans who are stuck in Afghanistan.
And as one reporter asked yesterday to Milley, who had no response, why didn't we secure the airbase as opposed to the airport? The airport is one runway, it's downtown, it's a terrible situation, can't secure it properly. the outsides of it, versus our air base, which is at least 2 runways and it's 30 miles outside of town. It'd be a much better thing. And he said, good question, great question. And then essentially, next question, I'm not going to answer. Let's go back and dissect the general or the defense secretary's comment that you just mentioned a second ago, guys. Can you play that one about capability?
You have the capability to go out and collect Americans.
We don't have the capability to go out and collect up large numbers of people, Bart.
That's interesting, Kristina. So when I think I did, and I think most people took that as like a weird way of saying we don't have the like equipment to do it or something. And it's like, no, you just don't have the will. But it sounds like you were taking it as maybe they were giving a little cover to the White House of they don't have authority to do it. Well, how do you interpret that?
Well, I do think that it's both. Can the U.S. military do this? Yes. With the troops on the ground, no. Probably not. So Biden has authorized 6,000 U.S. troops to go to Kabul airport. Right now, there is about 4,500 Americans who are assigned just to secure the airport. It is a disaster at the airport. You have to take care of whoever is inside the airport, which are thousands. You have to process, visa applicants. You have to process Americans. You have to make sure no terrorists are getting through. So I think the 4,500 is focused on the airport and securing the airport, making sure that the runway is functional. I mean, that's a huge job. And as you mentioned, it's a logistical. Kabul versus the Bagram Air Base, would have been much better to conduct this evacuation operation out of the Bagram Air Base. It's just a logistical nightmare to do it out of Kabul. So do we have the capability? Yes, if we float in more troops. Do we have the capability now? Probably not. But overall, Can the U.S. military go in, guns blazing, get Americans out? Overall, yes, but it would require a lot of political decisions.
Yeah, wow. All right, last question for you. Have you ever seen such a debacle of communication, right? With the president not saying anything, taking no questions. He did that short interview with Stephanopoulos, which was highly edited. I don't know by who or on what terms, but and then you have these guys, these generals, like, what are they doing? Like, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I haven't. And I've been here in Washington since 2006 and started reporting before then. So in my lifetime, this is completely unbelievable. This is Biden is giving mixed messages. He's blaming everyone else. He's blaming the U.S. military for not telling him. He's blaming the intelligence community. He's blaming the Afghan military. He's saying this was predictable and inevitable, but at the same time saying, no one could have imagined what would have, happened. And so the messages are just completely all over the place. I think we've seen in reports that the military has advised and did advise the Biden administration to stay longer in Afghanistan and wanted to start evacuation operations earlier. But as we see, Biden has been pretty resolute in insisting that this was the right decision. And he even said he factored in some chaos. He probably didn't factor in this much chaos. This is just a planning debacle. There's fingers being pointed everywhere to the military, to the intel, between those, entities, Congress. I mean, everyone is, there's a feeling like everyone wants to escape this sinking ship. This is just a debacle. You can't explain this away.
No, and I can't wait to see what the aftermath is going to be between him and Kamala Harris as well, right? There's certainly infighting there as well. Kristina, hey, we got to run. Appreciate your insight. Kristina Wong, Pentagon correspondent for Breitbart. Thanks, Kristina.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Have a wonderful day. Yes, and now yesterday, Biden did do a speech. No questions, of course, but it was about masks. It was attacking Republican governors and mask mandates. Like, what? And DeSantis took that opportunity to hit back. And of course, he's running for president, which is a good thing. So we'll talk about that coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Slater Crusaders. Afghanistan's on fire, Americans stuck, and Joe Biden misses the mark and takes the opportunity to speak to the American people, attacking Republican governors about mask mandates. Here.
I'm directing the Secretary of Education, an educator himself, to take additional steps to protect our children. This includes using all of his oversight authorities and legal action, if appropriate, against governors who are trying to block and intimidate local school officials and educators. And as I said before, if you aren't going to fight COVID-19, at least get out of the way of everyone else who's trying. You know, we're not going to sit by as governors try to block and intimidate educators protecting our children. For example, if a governor wants to cut the pay of a hardworking education leader who requires masks in a classroom, the money from the American Rescue Plan can be used to pay that person's salary.
The most tone-deaf press conference I've ever seen. He didn't take any questions. Here's DeSantis' response.
He is obsessed with having the government force kindergartners to wear masks all day in school. In Florida, we believe that that's the parents' decision. Joe Biden thinks the federal government should come in and overrule the parents and force these young kids to wear these masks. And you got to wonder, where are your priorities that you're so obsessed with this issue and so obsessed with taking away parents' rights, and you're letting Afghanistan burn, our border burn, and so many other things in our country fall to pieces?
Can't wait for him to become president. Brendon Leslie, Florida's conservative journalist, FLFloridaConservativeVoice.com. Brendon, how are you, brother?
How are we doing, Mr. Slater?
Well, Biden and the left thinks that Florida is burning and Florida's falling to pieces. How are they manipulating the numbers in Florida to scare the rest of the country?
You know, there's a couple interesting things. We were just talking off camera about this. When they speak about the kids being quarantining from COVID-19 in these schools, they say, I believe it was up in Tampa. It was like thousands of kids are quarantining because of COVID-19. Note, they don't say that they are tested positive of COVID-19. They're exposed to COVID-19. I also talked to a lot of people that have sick family members in the ICU, not because of COVID-19. They get a false positive, and then they have them retested. The next 3 tests are negative following that, but because they already tested false and it was positive, they already reported to the state, and it's already counting as a COVID case, and they refuse to take it down. So there's a lot of things in play that are really manipulating the true story.
It's unbelievable. It's the same thing as Afghanistan. We kicked off the show talking about the Afghanistan papers and the willful, intentional manipulation of the numbers and lying to the American people for 20 years about what went on in Afghanistan. It's the same thing with COVID. Same people, same system, same lack of accountability. And it's so obvious they're going after states like Florida and not Hawaii and Washington and other blue areas that have the same numbers, if not worse.
Yeah, and it's deliberate because you got the Democratic president who is doing a terrible job at everything. So they need to deflect, and they need to deflect some of that anger from the American public to a successful Republican such as Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, it's important to remember that the media is basically in the pockets of the Democratic Party. So they're just going to push any single lie that they say. And that's why, unfortunately, a lot of America ends up hating Governor DeSantis when the true story is life is doing okay down here. Yes, the hospitalizations are up, but this is the same exact peak we saw last year at this same exact time. And guess what? We survived that, and it was okay.
What's the vibe in Florida against DeSantis, right? Because obviously the national media is against him because he's going to run for president. Are the Democrats in Florida as rabid, or do they have to kind of admit that things are pretty going okay here too? Or no, are they just rabid animals, hate him with a passion?
They're narcissists. They're delusional down here. The Democrats in Florida are a special breed of stupid. It's crazy. But everyday folk here in Florida love Governor Ron DeSantis. I mean, look at this. He raised over $4 million for his campaign already. The next leading contender, likely Democratic challenger, Charlie Crist, he's got like $300,000. If that doesn't tell you what America thinks or Florida thinks of Governor Ron DeSantis, I don't know what does. But you're never going to hear about that in the mainstream media.
He won his election by so close. It was so close.
Well, I can tell you why. His campaigning style back in 2018 was terrible, and a lot of Republicans said that. But he's evolved so much. He's become such a different politician since then, and he's ready for a really great bounce back from his mediocre style of a campaign in 2018.
Hey, you're going to be our guy, Brendon, because obviously he's running. He's going to run for president, and you're going to be our inside source, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Brendon Leslie, Florida's conservative journalist. The website is flfloridaconservativevoice.com. I'm going to stress it again. It's the 10th time I've said it today. Afghanistan, COVID, the same thing. Same people, same system, same lack of accountability, same lying and manipulation. Don't be fooled anymore. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.